Good morning. This is Sue Shermer, and I am excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about the role of the transformed school counselor. Our purpose in this video is to just highlight some changes that have gone on in the profession over the last several years and what is the appropriate role and function of a current transformed school counselor. So before we start, I'd like for you to think back to your pre-K-12 experience. What was your relationship to your school counselor or school counselors, and what did they do? I know a lot of times we frame up our mental models based on our experience. And so as we go through this video today, I would like for you to think about what was your mental model of school counseling, and does that align with the current school counseling experience? So again, our outcome for today is a clear understanding of the role of the transformed school counselor. I will be sharing a number of resources as we go through this video, and they can all be found in a Google folder by using this QR link or QR code. Don't worry if you didn't get it right away. I will share it again at the end of the video. And as always, please feel free to contact me at Heartland if you have any questions whatsoever. So what's the big deal, right? Why this big fuss over school counselor versus guidance counselor? I know when I was in school, we used to refer to the one person we had at our high school as a guidance counselor. And that kind of came about with the onset of the arms race, or with Sputnik. When Sputnik, the Russians first landed in space or explored space, our government was appalled that someone would get ahead of us. So they charged a group of guidance counselors to guide students into math and science so that we could catch up and overcome. And so that's kind of where it came from. Today, our role is much different as school counselors. We have a lot of different expectations. We meet students in a number of different places, and rather than guiding them where we think they should go, we're all about helping students find where they belong, what works best for them, and for them to achieve academic, social, emotional, and career success. I know it, for a lot of folks, it's kind of become a joke at our agency because someone will mistakenly say guidance counselor, and I will pipe up and say, hey, no, it's a school counselor. So what's the big deal? Why worry about that? Well, in 1990, ASCA, which is the American School Counseling Association, issued an official statement saying we need to change the title to school counselor rather than the previous title of guidance counselor. In Iowa, we were a little far behind, and our professional licenses changed just probably about 15 years ago to say school counselor rather than guidance counselor. And so researchers at Ohio State University did a study of counselors in Ohio to say, why does it matter? And what you will see here, and this is one of those resources that you can find at the QR code, there were so many different findings. They were statistically significantly less likely to believe in their job and what was they were doing. They were affected by terminology. So it's more about perception of competence. And you can read more about it here on this resource, or you can go to the actual study and read about it yourself. But it does make a difference. And so you will see a lot of folks saying school counselor rather than guidance counselor, with that big guidance X'd out. One of the documents that's in the folder to share with you is the actual role of school counselors. And so who are they? They're certified licensed educators who improve student success for all students by implementing a comprehensive school counseling program. There's been a lot of discussion about what is a comprehensive school counseling program, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one of the things that's important to recognize is that a comprehensive school counseling program is not only best practice, but it's also required in the state of Iowa. So qualifications to become a school counselor: you must have at a minimum a master's degree in school counseling. You must meet the licensure standards. And of course, in Iowa, you don't have to have been a teacher before you become a school counselor. As long as you have that master's degree in school counselor and can meet those licensure standards, you can become licensed to be a school counselor. Of course, just like any other educator, you have to continue your educational requirements with license renewal credits or college credits. And of course, one of the big things is you need to uphold those American School Counseling Association ethical and professional standards. And we'll talk about those more a little bit later, but the ethical standards for school counselors are much more specific and much more in-depth, much more robust than the ethical standards for normal educators. And those ethical standards have been revised several times. They are what guides our work as school counselors. You can find the ethical standards for school counselors on the ASCA website. There's also a copy in the resource folder. But it talks in the ethical standards a lot about our responsibility to advocate for students, what that might look like, the importance in disaggregating data, the importance of keeping confidentiality. And so keep in mind that this is not your typical education licensure requirements. These are much more strict and much more robust. The other piece that you will see are the American School Counselor professional standards and competencies. These are some very clear standards, again, much more in depth than the 8 teaching standards, but really lays out what it is that school counselors should know, understand, and be able to do, how they should run their program, and the ethics that need to be underlying all of those instances. Both of these documents are regularly reviewed and updated, so be sure that you have the latest edition. One of the things we did in Iowa, I mentioned the Iowa teaching standards, but in 2015, we had heard from so many school counselors that they are being required to be evaluated on the Iowa teaching standards, which is in Iowa code, and it didn't always align with their work. And so we took those 8 teaching standards and we crosswalked those with the school counselor standards and competencies that I mentioned earlier. And we said, what does that look like? And how might that work if you are evaluating a teacher or evaluating a counselor, excuse me. And we created a document for administrators and counselors alike to use. They're still evaluated on the 8 teaching standards, but they are aligned and crosswalked with those school counselor competencies. Well, then the school counselor competencies from ASCA were updated in 2019. And so we updated our school counselor evaluation supplement. And I'd like to just take a minute and share with you what that looks like right now. So for example, standard number 1, we know relates to student achievement. And up at the top, we have the standard as it is written in the Iowa teaching standards. Then along the left column, we have the Iowa teaching criteria. And on the right column, we itemize the 3 standards that connect to the one about student achievement. So here are the American School Counseling Association standards on the right. We listed some possible artifacts of what counselors could use in this area. And then there's a very robust rubric of sorts for both counselors and administrators to go through under each one of those standards. And you will see up at the top, there's B-PF7, which is the code for the school counselor standard, demonstrate leadership through the development and implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program. Underneath that, you will see the 3 competencies. So there's the standard and the competency. And it gives counselors a chance to say, yep, I'm meeting the standard, I'm developing, I don't meet, or I exceed, whichever way it is. And so these are done for every one of those 8 teaching standards. And I think it's a 32-page document, which seems pretty extensive, but it really lays out not only as an evaluation tool, but also for counselors to say, what am I doing well and what do I need to improve in my program? We also have a summary document for the administrators so that there isn't all of this information, but if they want to see it in a much shorter format. So one of the things that we talk about frequently is that school counselors should be members of their leadership team. And what does that look like? And so again, you will see those 3 areas we've talked about: academic achievement, social emotional learning, and then post-secondary plans or careers. And so these are some of the things that school counselors do, just a few of them. And those are highlighted throughout. So in doing this, we know that school counselors operate in a multi-tiered system of supports. Trish Hatch, who is one of the writers of the national model, who has now created her own Hatching Results Agency, has created a PowerPoint and video that shares an MTMDSS, which is a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports. It references the fact that school counselors work in the academic, career, and social emotional areas. So I'm going to share this video at this time.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use any.
Hi, this is Trish Hatch, and today we're going to talk about the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports, or MTMDSS. As educators, we're familiar with the multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, which focuses on students' academic and behavioral needs. But for school counselors who focus on 3 domains, academic, college and career, and social emotional development, we need a more robust system. We need a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports, or MTMDSS. In MTMDSS, school counselors ensure that all students receive the instruction and support they need to grow academically, develop socially and behaviorally, and to prepare for post-secondary options. In this system, activities, instruction, and intervention services are grouped into tiers, ranging from Tier 1 services, a core program of universal supports that apply to everyone, to Tier 2 services, or targeted interventions, which would typically only apply to approximately 20% of students. And finally, to Tier 3 services, intentional interventions, which would typically apply to between 5 and 10% of students. MTMDSS provides a data-driven approach to determining which of these levels of interventions or tiers are appropriate for any individual student. Under MTMDSS, Tier 1 encompasses agreed-upon services that all students receive, such as standards and competency-based school counselor core curriculum lessons, individual student planning, which includes 4- and 6-year academic and post-secondary plans, and district and school-wide agreed-upon activities and events. Tier 1 is designed to be comprehensive, preventative, developmental, and proactive. Tier 2 is designed for students who are exhibiting barriers to learning, struggling academically, or are deserving of additional supports. It uses data-based decision-making to select at-risk indicators such as attendance, behavior, credit deficiency, and post-secondary readiness data. Targeted intervention data elements, grade levels, and timeframes are queried to determine which students qualify for interventions. Depending on the student, Tier 2 interventions may include short-term individual or small group counseling, progress monitoring, consultation, collaboration, and or referrals to resources within or outside the school building. Tier 3 services are designed for students experiencing emergency or crisis response events, or to support students with needs that remain unresolved within Tier 2. School counselors provide short-term, solution-focused counseling, consultation, and when appropriate, referral to additional resources. Over time, MTMDSS allows school counselors to spend more time implementing proactive Tier 1 action plans and less time engaged in reactive Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities. The ultimate goal is to ensure all students achieve their greatest potential and graduate ready for post-secondary success.
So if you have questions about that, also listed in the resources are Trish's, her website and the many resources that she has. She's written several books, and there are lots of resources around student success, analyzing data, that kind of thing. So what is the school counselor's role? We've talked about that school counseling program, and the school counselor is the one that designs and delivers that. They also lead, advocate, and collaborate to promote equity and access for students. They uphold ethical and professional standards, and that development of the school counseling program is based on the following areas of the ASCA national model: define, deliver, manage, and assess. Looks like this. And what's really interesting is when they created this in, I want to say 2002, they weren't real sure exactly how this would work. But as they did it, they noticed that the block on the bottom, which is defined, that's the foundation of the program that identifies student standards and professional standards. And you'll see the two arrows, the two black arrows that come up out of that box to deliver and manage. So you deliver with both direct and indirect student services, and you manage the program through planning and focus. Then those two boxes have white arrows that lead up to assess. So you've got program assessments, but then also school counselor assessment and appraisal of the individual school counselor. That, if you look at it carefully, you can see the black arrow leading back down to define, and then you start all over. Rather than a circular pattern, this one is done a little bit differently. This is the 4th edition of the model, and this is spring of 2021. Right now, I believe they're looking at refining that yet again. In Iowa, we also have the Iowa School Counseling Program Framework, which goes back to Iowa Code, which requires that all schools have at least one school counselor, all school districts, with the goal of moving to one school counselor per 350 students. And that person is responsible for and implements a school counseling program as identified in administrative rule. This was done in February of 2014. So let's go back to that model again. The define portion, we talked a little bit about this, but this is where that basic core of the school counseling program lives. The student standards, we have the American School Counseling Association Mindsets and Behaviors. We also have professional standards. It is the responsibility of the school counselor to take those mindsets and behaviors for student success and identify what is it that every student at every age group needs to know, understand, and be able to do. ASCA is very hesitant about creating standards by grade level because different schools in different parts of the country have different needs. So they have left that pretty vague and up to the individual school counselor to determine what works best for them in their environment. And then we have the professional standards that I talked about earlier, the ethical standards for school counselors, and the school counselor professional standards and competencies. As we move up to manage, we know that in order to run a program, it has to be managed. And so there's the two parts of this, the program focus and the program planning. And the focus are those pieces like the beliefs, the vision, and the mission statement of the school counseling program. And then program planning includes all of those specific things that need to be accomplished to make that happen. Analyzing data, looking at outcome goals, creating action plans, lesson plans, having that administrative conference, how they spend their time and their calendars, both annual and weekly for themselves and for the school and the program. And then also, if they have an advisory council, what that looks like. Along with that is the delivery statement. And ASCA's guidance is that school counselors should spend 80% of their time in direct and indirect services for students. So the direct are those things that we talk about in person, one-on-one or small group or classroom. And the indirect are those things where a counselor might meet with a teacher or with a parent to do a consultation or collaboration. This is when they are working on referrals to outside agencies, those kinds of things for a specific student. The other 20% of their time should be made up in things like professional development, analyzing data, and those kinds of things to make their program run smoothly. One of the things that gets really confusing is when you have a lot of people in the building or in the district that are providing supports for students, much like a school counselor. So we have taken this form that was created by Des Moines Public Schools a number of years ago, and we've placed it in the resource folder as a guide for you to use. It is a Word document so that you can adjust and refine for what works for your school. It's important that all the people that are working in that area understand what's happening and who is doing what. Then we come to assess. And what does that look like? How do you take all that data that you have collected, make sure you're doing what you need to be doing? That's in the assess part. Going through the program assessment. So you are seeing, did I do all the pieces that I should be doing? What are my results showing? What are my outcome measures? And how are we doing? And what needs to be adjusted in our program, which would then lead back again to that define portion. The two booklets that will help with this, the red one on the left is the actual Ask a National Model, and on the right is the implementation guide. This really only includes the manage and assess portions, but this is a walkthrough of how you can make this happen if you are not in a counselor academy. You know, we've offered counselor academies in Iowa for several years. We now have a individual self-paced program in our AEA Learning Online system. You can take that for credit or for no credit. You can also put groups of school counselors together to take that as a team. One of the interesting things that Hatching Results has is a self-assessment, comparing the roles of the guidance counselor and the school counselor. What does that look like? And this is, again, just a piece of that assessment. But it's really nice to take a look at and see, where am I? Am I a guidance counselor or am I a true transformed school counselor? This is, if nothing else, it starts a conversation about what might be some areas I need to shift in my program. And again, I mentioned the self-paced course. The links are here. They're found in the training system. They can be taken for 2 license renewal credits. Again, they can be taken by yourself or with a team. So if you have questions or comments, hopefully this has helped you understand the role of the transformed school counselor. The school counseling contacts are listed here for each AEA in Iowa, as well as the Iowa Department of Education. Therese Jurgensen is our contact there. And that Google Drive folder with all of the resources that I've mentioned, all of these are in document form and you can find those there. Feel free to make a copy and share with others. And finally, some other resources, the Iowa School Counselor Association or the American School Counseling Association has extensive resources for you. And again, that Hatching Results that I mentioned earlier has quite a few resources around starting your school counseling program. I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope that this has been enlightening for some of the work that we need to do as a school counselor. And thank you very much.